Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from July 14th, 2023. And I'm recording this on January 11th, 2023. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. As always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week they put out a list of 10 books that are moving in the market, that are trending, that people are chasing, that are jumping in value. And we look back 6 months later to see how those comics perform once whatever prompted everybody to chase them has cooled off a little bit. We've moved away from the news. We've moved away from their release. How do they do in the market afterwards? Should you have been patient? Were they worth chasing in the moment? If you've been watching this, I think this video marks right at maybe next week. I think next week would mark the 5th year of doing this. And if you've been watching for those 5 years, you know that patience is a virtue, although it doesn't always pay off. So let's see what factors affected this week's books and see what we can learn. So without further ado, let's get into this. We got several covers starting the list this week. We're going to start with Barnstormers #1, the Jenny Frison 1 in 25. On the list for the second week in a row. Last week we talked about it was a $40 to $50 book for $125. Not a great sign. Usually ends up between ratio and double on that. So usually about a $30, $35 book, which is what happened to this one. But week 2, this one jumped all the way up to a $60 to $75 book, which was still not above triple ratio, which is really where 125 needs to be to have any chance of holding. So this turned into a trap from that $60 to $75 value. At now 30 to 35, 9.8, 170. So pretty good deal on 9.8 if you got it. Even at these higher values, you could have still made a little bit of a profit here. But for the most part, this was definitely a trap in a book that was worth being patient for. Next, we have more Frisian. We have Lady Death, Cybernetic Desecration. Desecration, #1, the Jenny Frison variant limited to 90. So this was only available to the highest tier of the Kickstarter. You could only get, so there was only 90 of these out there. Back then they were going for $250 to $305 raw. Now there's no recent sales. There's none listed, there's none listed on their own. So there's 3 versions of this cover. A set of all 3, there is a 9.8 listing for $3,000. So all 3 books together is $3,000, but no. So I feel like this is probably straight cash if there was a sale to look at, but there's no sale to go off of. So we're going to say it's steady and worth it just due to a lack of knowledge. But obviously based on that one listing, based on the fact there was only 90 of these, my guess is it probably would go for more, but there's no way to know for sure. So we're going to call this, steady. All right, next, we got Gene Simmons, Dominatrix #1. This is the Joseph Lisner 1 in 10. Back then it was going for $35 to $50. Now it's a $40 to $100 book, 9.8, 130, but only one sale there. So you take that with a grain of salt. But $40 to $100 is definitely up in straight cash compared to what it was back then. Gorgeous cover, and obviously, apparently, people are still willing to chase this one. This is a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect this series and this particular cover to do as well as it has, but then again, a 1 in 10 that made it all the way to triple to 5 times ratio is actually a pretty good sign on something that's going to hold and potentially increase in value, and it did. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man #26. The second print, Gary Frank 1 in 50 variant. This 1 in 50 was going for 90 to 100, so right at double, which usually means it's going to end up back down around ratio. And that's exactly what happened here. I actually predicted dumpster fire that this one, because we already knew when this was coming out that Kamala was coming back. She wasn't staying dead. And this almost made the dumpster fire, but it still is on the trap side of that 50% line in terms of a decrease. Next, we have Harley Quinn Screws Up the DC Universe, #5, the Dave Johnson 1 in 25. This homage to the Superman Spider-Man Treasury book was going for $50 to $60 on a 1 in 25. Again, usually right around double ratio usually means ratio or slightly above. In this case, it actually ended up below ratio, 15 to 20 on this one. So yeah, this one turned into a dumpster fire. I actually thought this might do a little better because it's an unusual homage to a popular book, but nope. Not a homage we see very often, but no, it did not. Our last cover is Superman Lost, number 5, the Jay Lee 1 in 25. This 1 in 25 was going for 30 plus. Not a great sign, but it's still now a $20 to $40 book. So it's still basically right in that just above ratio to just above level that it was before. So it ended up being steady and worth it. It didn't back up, but it obviously didn't go anywhere higher either. So it kind of stayed right in the range that we saw it back then. All right, with that, we're going to move into our one comic buzz book of the week, which is Amazing Spider-Man number 17. You could also call this a cover as well. This is the Ed McGuinness 1 in 25 of the first appearance of Rick Rapp, a creature from Limbo that decided they wanted to be Spider-Man. $15 back then, 9.8 up to 60. Now it's a $15 to $50 book, 9.8, 140 to 200. So apparently people are willing to pay $150 to $200 for a 9.8 of Rick Rapp. I give up sometimes. I don't understand, but it's up in straight cash for this 6 months. Just because it hit the list because the character was coming back into the story. But yeah, this stuns me. This book is great for this month. I'm not gonna lie. All right, next we have Marvel Fanfare number 40. And basically, Kayfabe, a YouTube channel, did a deep dive discussion of this particular comic. So, like, it jumped like 1,000% in sales. It was still only going for $3 back then, but I was like, what? I said whatever because, like, okay, people are paying $3 for a book to read a book that somebody was talking about. It's still a $2 to $10 book, but most of the sales are on that $2 to $3 to $4 side. We're going to call it steady and worth it. But obviously it didn't really go up, but yeah, just kind of a silly reason to me to buy a book, but whatever. Next, we got 4 books that are related to Deadpool news that we got about the movie back then. First, or rumors, I should say. First up, we have Marvel Comics Presents number 95. And there was a set photo showing Wolverine in the yellow costume, finally. That's what caused us to hit the list. This is the origin of the yellow suit. Back then, it was still only going for like $5, 9.8 going for 65. Now it's a $1 to $15 book. 9.8 most recent sale, 80. I think there's actually a couple right at 80. So we're going to call this one steady and worth it too. Slightly up on the 9.8, you could say, but within the kind of the error range you would normally have on these. But yeah, people interested in the origin of the yellow suit, at least a little bit. Me, I'm just looking forward to the movie. So, next we have Elektra, official movie adaptation number 1. And this is the rumor that we were going to get both Ben Affleck's Daredevil and Jennifer Garner's Elektra back in some form in this Deadpool 3 jumping through the multiverse kind of movie. Big Jennifer Garner fan, but I don't know about her portrayal as Elektra, but whatever. So supposedly that's why this hit the list. It was doing $10 to $20 for a raw copy, 9.8 doing 160, and now it's a $1 to $15 book, 9.8, 90. Yeah, we're going to call this a trap. Definitely down. Most of the sales are under the $10 mark. The 9.8 is obviously backed up a bunch. Not a ton of value here for a book about a movie that most people did not like. Next, we have Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, number 1. This was hitting the list because the rumor was this was kind of the storyline that we were maybe getting, as he was going to be jumping through universes, killing a bunch of versions of different characters, that kind of thing. Back then, raw copies were going for 20 to 120, so a huge wide range on raw copies on this thing. 9.8 got all the way up to 475. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. I will say there was a couple sale. There was an outlier sale around 50, but for the most part, it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 going for 180. Yeah, this is a dumpster fire. 9.8 at 180 as opposed to 475. Yeah, this was a terrible investment if you were paying on the upper end of this. They're just movie storylines never really hold. particularly after the movie comes out, but even in this case, before the movie comes out, because it obviously got delayed with all the strikes and stuff. Next, our last Deadpool-related book, we got Wolverine, number 88, the first meeting of Deadpool and Wolverine. Back then, 9.8 non-deluxes were going for $525. 9.8 deluxe went for $600. You'll notice I say I just put the $525 to $600 here, because when I was looking at sales right now, there was a complete overlap in prices of the deluxe and non-deluxe. So I didn't really separate them as I was evaluating the values here. Raw copies, 35 to 80, 9.8, 350 to 510. So down, and I'll be back on this book on those 9.8 values comparatively. I do think the deluxe is a slightly more expensive, but there is definitely overlap in the prices here. So that's why I just kind of lumped them as I talked about this book. All right. With that, we got 4 books left. They're all related to rumors about the new DC universe that James Gunn is putting together. First up, we have The Terrifics, number 1. First team appearance of The Terrifics. And this was hitting the list because casting news about Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho made people think, well, there's a big chunk of the team, so we might actually get The Terrifics. Raw copies were going for $12, 9.8, 52. Now it's a $5 to $15 book with most of the sales under 10. We'll call this down, and I'll be back. No recent 9.8 sales. Not a ton of spec here. First teams, unless they're the really big ones, don't usually hold a ton of value. Next, we have Green Lantern, number 59, first appearance of Guy Gardner. And again, this is casting, I think, rumors, nothing official then, but yeah. Raw copies were going for $150 to $300. 9.4 hit 1925. So that was causing us to hit the list. Right now, raw copies are $50 to $400, depending on the range on condition. No recent sales higher than like an 8.0 on eBay, so it was hard to judge where the value was on any of those. So I just went on the raw, steady and worth it here for the most part in terms of the range. This book it's staying right a bit in the range that it was. Maybe a bit of you could maybe argue, and I'll be back on some of these higher end slab sales, but pretty close. Next, we have JSA, Secret Files and Origins, number 1, the first appearance of Kendra Saunders' version of Hawk Girl, and we got Hawk Girl casting news also. So all of this is casting stuff that was causing these books to hit the list. 15 to 30 for this one, 9.8 up to 175. Now it's a $10 to $25 book. 9.8, only one sale, 90. So you take that with a grain of salt, as always, when there's only one sale of a slab book. But yeah, down, and I'll be back on the raw side. Definitely a trap on the 9.8 side, but since the vast majority of sales are raw, we'll just stick to that on our overall evaluation of this book. And then our last book is, I already talked about the Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho news. Brave and the Bold, 57, first appearance of Metamorpho. Back then, raw copies were going for 100 to 250. A 6.5 hit its all-time high at 575. Now it's a $50 to $350 book raw. 6.5, 3 to 350 right now with multiple sales. So yeah, another down, and I'll be back. Again, borderline trap on that graded size, but at least on the 6.5 side of things. But yeah, definitely down on this book. We got a bunch of delays right at the beginning of this. We'll see, which I think is not actually that bad a deal, because it does give us a little break between the old DC and what James Gunn is bringing for the new one. So with that is this week's list. Still had a couple up books, several steady books, so not quite the everything is down like it was last week. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.